Marie Camenares. I'm a horticulturalist. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I was asked by Sachem Library to talk to you about garden flowers. So here we are in my garden, and I'd like to give you a little tour of some of my favorite plants here. I have some perennials I'd like to show you, and I have some flowering shrubs. So let's start off right away with one of my favorite perennials. Come along with me. We're going to go up and down and all around, and I hope you enjoyed this little garden tour. Right here we have a lady's mantle, and as you can see, we're in the shade. So lady's mantle is a beautiful perennial. It is just coming up now. It's around May 7th, and as you can see, the foliage on this plant is very delicate. It actually feels almost velvety. It's a round type of leaf. And what's lovely about this plant is that when it rains, the little raindrops just stay right on the leaf and it holds it, and it's just so glistening, very, very pretty. It will send up a spike, and that spike will be loaded with very tiny little beautiful chartreuse flowers. It's just really, really lovely to have in the garden. Now also, right here in the garden, this is a variegated Laura, and it's just coming up now. This is sometimes considered an evergreen. What you're seeing here now with all the little spots on the foliage, that's really left over from last year. So this has been like this the whole year long through the winter. And Laura is great for the shade, for the sun. This variegated Laura will send up a spike with lavender flowers, and then later on in the season, those flowers are going to develop very, very dark purple berries. They're just beautiful. If you look very closely, you can see the new foliage starting to come up right here. So that is this season's growth right in here. And all of this is from last year. So if you're looking for something with a little bit of an evergreen quality to it, we've got variegated Laura for you. Now, over here in the garden, this is one of my hydrangeas. Now, I have quite a few, and I'd like to explain a little bit the difference between the two. There are hydrangeas that bloom on new wood. There's hydrangeas that bloom on old wood. There's hydrangeas that bloom on both. So this variety is called Endless Summer, and it will actually bloom on both. And what that means is, even though we have a bad winter, I will still get flowers out of my Endless Summer hydrangea. Now moving along, and you can see here there's more variegated Laura. Here's this new growth all coming up here. And it's a good idea, what I have with the way I arrange my garden, I try and group similar things together. So when it's time for maintenance, it's a little bit easier to maintain the garden that way. And it's a good idea always to put down mulch too. It conserves water and it suppresses weeds. So let's come right along here in the garden. And we have another one of my favorite plants. This is a shrub, a flowering shrub called Karya Japonica. Karya Japonica is great for, guess what, partial shade and sun. And the nice thing about Karya Japonica is you can clip this down, you can shear it, you can make it any shape you want, you can let it grow, and it can be like a taller shrub. Okay, so now also moving along, we have another perennial over here. This is Solomon Seal. I originally planted Solomon Seal in this part of the garden, and then I divided it in the early spring a few years back, and I planted it in another area which gets a little bit more sun, and it's doing much nicer. So Solomon Seal, a perennial, sends up these curved arching stems with variegated foliage and these beautiful little white drop flowers. They're very, very delicate. The nice thing about Solomon Seal, no fuss. You can plant it in dry soil, not to worry, just some partial shade, well-drained soil, and you're good to go. It's a great addition to the garden. So as we move down the garden path here, we have peonies, which they sometimes, I think you have to love or hate peonies because they do attract ants. And the reason why they do that is because there's a very sugary-like substance that oozes from the flower buds, and the ants like to eat that. You can get rid of that. Some people have this old wives' tale that you need ants to have good peony blossoms, but that's not true. Peonies like a lot of full sun. They'll take a little part shade, but they're very beautiful in the garden. They need to be staked because they can sometimes get a little top heavy. And right along here, we have Deutzia Nico, which is Nico means it's small, and this is a low flowering shrub. You can see how it's loaded with white little flower blossoms. They haven't opened yet. As you can see, they're still in the bud stage, but this will just get loaded with beautiful white flowers, and it's not fussy. You can have this in sun or partial shade, and it makes a great border plant and just very lovely in the garden. And right next to my Nico, my Deutzia Nico, is another one of my favorites. Now it's going to sound disgusting, but it's really a beautiful plant. This is called Ickianthus, and Ickianthus is just a magnificent plant to put in your garden. Look here at all these flower buds. These will open up like inverted lily of the valley. This is a red veined Ickianthus, and I don't know if you can see, maybe close up you can, that the flowers are veined with red veination, and they are like a creamy white colored flower. Now what is also wonderful about Ickianthus is you get an added bonus in the fall because the foliage turns golden, red. It's just beautiful. Sometimes it's golden, sometimes it's red, depending on the variety. Now moving right along, we're going to come to another one of my favorite plants. It's called the Carolina allspice. And Carolina allspice has the most magnificent flowers that are an unusual maroonish red color. Now right over here, I have a couple of them. I'll show you both. So this one here is one of them, and I don't know if you can see the flower buds on this. Can you see those flower buds? They have a beautiful smell, and it's a very clean, fresh pineapple, banana type of smell. They're great for using, both the foliage and the flowers smell. So they're great for using in potpourri. And years ago they would even line the linen drawers with branches of this flower, Carolina allspice. Really great. It grows to be like even a small tree, but it can be shaped and sheared down to a smaller size and even grown as a hedge. Okay, we're going to come and take a look at a few more perennials. So right along this way, and I'll show you some of the perennials. Okay, down here we have one of my favorite plants. This is an Astilbe, and the foliage on this is just very delicate and graceful, very lacy looking, and the flowers on it are very unusual. It will send up a spike, and the flowers on the Astilbe are very plume-like, very delicate, very feathery, so it really lends a lot of interest to your garden. It's not fussy, it grows in full sun or partial shade. It does like to be fertilized in the spring, so don't forget to give it a shot of fertilizer. But I have a couple of varieties here. You can tell the difference from the colors of the foliage. This is a darker pink and this is a lighter pink here. And right near my Astilbe is a cardinal flower. Now this cardinal flower I just planted this year, and it took a little damage from the cold spell that we've been having, but it has maroon colored foliage, which is also of great interest in the garden because it really stands out next to all the green. The cardinal flower is going to get about maybe 3 feet high, sending up a spike of very bright red flowers, all little flowers on this spike. And the nice thing about cardinal flower is that it attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. So I know that you're going to want to include that one in your garden. Also nearby is one of my favorite hydrangeas. This is an Annabelle hydrangea. An Annabelle hydrangea is one of those hydrangeas that grows on new wood. That means at the end of the season or at the beginning of the spring, you can cut this hydrangea down to about 12 inches from the ground. As you can see, I have done that, and it's just starting to come up now. The Annabelle hydrangea is magnificent. It's my kind of hydrangea because no matter what the weather, you're going to get flowers. It blooms on the new wood, as I said before. It's going to start out with a huge white ball of hydrangea flower, and then as it ages, that color will turn a greenish, almost like a lime green color. Not really great to dry, but certainly magnificent to bring in the house as a cut flower, as well as the Astilbe. So that makes even such a pretty arrangement. Now I have a few other hydrangeas I'd like to show you, and I'd like to explain why I'm holding this soil test kit as I explain my other hydrangeas. So come along with me and we'll take a look at those. So right around here in the garden, we have this climbing hydrangea. This climbing hydrangea is actually a woody vine. You can see how woody it is, but it's great for a shady location. It will also grow in the sun. It will grow in part shade. It will grow along a fence, up a building, and you can see here all the beautiful flowers that are set on here. Now I have my climbing hydrangea growing up this tripod here, and I've pruned this hydrangea, and that's something that you can do, but you just have to wait until after it's finished flowering. It's a great plant. It's not fussy. It's really like a wonderful addition to the garden, and you can propagate this by letting one of these branches grow a little lower, or even just setting it in a pot and just weighing it down into the soil, and eventually it will send out roots. So that's a great way to expand your collection of climbing hydrangeas, and you can give them to friends. Now right alongside the climbing hydrangea is one of my PG hydrangeas, another great plant that grows on new wood. And as you can see, I have cut this down just to keep the size in control, but it can really get out of hand and quite large if you let it. But these send panicles of flowers that are about 10 inches. So that's really incredible when you think about to have such a beautiful flower head that way. The PG hydrangea is a great hydrangea to dry. That's not a problem. It's going to start out white and eventually turn a pink color, almost like a little bit of maroon in there, and it just would look incredible. Now what about those other hydrangeas that we have Easter time, the pink and the blue hydrangeas? Those florist hydrangeas are called Hydrangea Macrophylla. That's where this comes in. The pink and blue all depends on the soil and the level of acidity or alkalinity in the soil. And that's why you need to do a soil test if you are fussy of whether you want pink or blue hydrangeas. The blue ones will bloom blue in acidic soil, but they will turn to pink in alkaline soil. Over here, I have the Hydrangea Macrophylla. This is the hydrangea that blooms on old wood. So it's just starting to leaf out now, and I will let it go maybe another couple of weeks before I decide which canes are not going to produce any flowers or foliage, and then I'll remove them. I really just, I'm very careful when I do prune Hydrangea Macrophylla because it sets its flowers up in July. So we don't want to go ahead and prune like crazy and then just prune off flower heads. And oftentimes that happens in gardens with very aggressive gardeners or homeowners that want to trim their shrubs a little bit too vigorously. What I'd like to show you with the soil test, if you do get one yourself or you can have it done, you have this color chart. And as you can see here, these yellow and orange areas, this is where the soil is very strongly acidic. Then as we move along to the red, we have moderately acidic. Then we come up here to a pH of around 6.0 to 6.6. This is slightly acidic. And then we move along this range here in the 6.8 to 7.2, and that is a very neutral range soil. So what does this all mean? Well, if you want to grow a nice vegetable garden, you want your soil to be somewhere in this range here from 6.0 to 6.6. And if you want those hydrangeas to be nice and blue, you want a range down in here. If you want them to be very pink, you want a range up in here when you do a soil test. If you're growing azaleas, if you're growing rhododendrons, if you're going to grow the echinanthus that I showed you, you want a more slightly acid soil. And if you're growing lavender or lilacs, you want a little bit more of an alkaline soil. And you'll really do well to have a soil test in your garden. If you haven't purchased a kit, you can get them from Cornell or you could get them from any garden center, and it's a good idea to do. And with that, let's move on to one or two more plants before we wrap this up. I'd like to show you a viburnum plant. It's a flowering shrub, and we have here, often mistaken for a hydrangea, but this is a snowball viburnum. And as you can see here, that's really, just like its name, it sends out these flowers that almost looks like little snowballs. This is really at the very early stage of the flowering. It's going to get larger, of about maybe 4 inches in diameter. And it will start out with this kind of light green color, but as they mature, they're going to turn white. And that's why oftentimes people would mistake this for a hydrangea. But definitely this is worth having in your garden. It grows in well-drained soil, it grows in the sun, harsh shade, and you can shear this down, but you want to do it after it flowers. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me on my garden tour. I hope you stay safe and stay healthy and happy gardening. Bye for now.